So have you watched any of our... Damn it, this is the second time I've asked you if you've watched some of our podcasts.
You know, when I click the link, I do just sort of sit there watching the timeline play. I do watch the screen to listen to it.
Yeah.
I don't have it on in the background.
Do you imagine, like, when you hear our sexy voices and, like, do you imagine, like, flowing hair, like, just blonde locks in the wind? Just...
No. All I hear is the sibilants. The S's.
Das. And that,
The
That's all you hear. You know, the,
What is that? Is that part of sibilants?
I don't know. It might just be something that comes out of your mouth. The,
Oh, I guess when other people are talking, I'm kind of going,
Yeah, generally.
It's not much of a conversation.
I mean, could be. So you haven't listened to us. You haven't watched us either. You haven't imagined us.
No, I have not imagined us. I am one of us. I don't need to
God.
imagine.
One of us.
Google gobble, one of us.
So I get the thing we haven't done yet is an older movie.
An older movie.
And this isn't really even going back that far, is it?
This is like the 60s, isn't it? Or maybe late 50s? 58?
I think it's the 60s.
Yeah, I thought it was the early 60s, like 61.
That sounds right.
I could be way off.
No, it is 50s. Well, it's 57, which is, to me, that's relatively new age.
Well, yeah, people were getting out of like the golden age of Hollywood type movies. I mean,
Golden Age
Cleopatra
was
was still coming down the pipeline, but
yeah. But you think about it's weird because you think about older golden age of Hollywood, and you don't really think.
But you think of like Preston Sturges and Jimmy Stewart movies and shit like that.
But even that's like 50s and 60s. Like when I think of it, I'm thinking of like 30s and 40s, and like that's like that crowd of actors.
Oh, you meant the golden age.
That crowd of actors is so different from the 50s and 60s in a way. I mean, they're still there. They're more mature.
I feel like in the early part of the movies of Hollywood, the actors that you're talking about, everybody was still acting like they're on a stage, sort of.
Yeah.
Talking like this, see? Yeah.
Well, that was the 20s, I would say.
Really?
Well,
God. History of cinema was my worst class in
20s and 30s.
I can't keep it all straight.
That was like, like we were talking about The Thin Man today.
Yeah, that was the 30s, right?
Yeah.
Or was that 40s, early 40s?
It was probably early 30s, I would say.
Early 30s.
Early mid.
Mid
30s.
I'm wrong
Maybe?
on every.
I don't know.
On every count.
Somewhere in there, because I'm imagining, me and my obsession with Gene Tierney and watching her movies. That was like
true. You've had a lot more
40s.
Exposure.
That was like the 40s era. And
yeah,
that was
film noir was late 30s and 40s. And
then that was like Dana Andrews and
Laura.
And like I feel like most of the actors that people know today from that era, quote unquote, even though it was like really the 50s and 60s, like where you get into the actors that people know, like John Wayne and
Cary Grant was around since the 30s, but he was
around,
still working into the 60s.
But he kind of grew into his shoes, kind of like Jimmy Stewart kind of grew into...
right. Another option tonight was His Girl Friday.
Right.
And that was 1930? That was like way early.
I'm constantly running back and forth checking all these. Was it really? Well, this is 1940.
What the fuck? Everything... is getting jumbled. Like the timelines, they don't make any sense to me.
His Girl Friday, at least the Criterion disc, has a second movie.
Oh, that's where I was
getting here, 1931.
Yeah. It's like another version of the same story from the
probably
30s.
Yeah, that they based this on. So,
yeah,
I don't know, but tonight it's fascinating to me because I've never seen this movie, and it's directed by one of the most iconic filmmakers of all time.
And this was before he was an icon.
And this is so I'm kind of curious to see how his style translated into the rawness of what he was doing at the time. And that's...
Can you see on the credits there? Did Kirk Douglas produce this?
It does not say. It says James B. Harris.
Okay.
No, this is Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory.
I might be thinking
And
of
I'm-
Spartacus, another Kubrick Douglas collaboration.
Right. And I'm guessing that when Paths of Glory came out, it was not labeled Stanley Kubrick's Path of Glory
No.
because the studio was like, who the fuck is this kid? Who wants to
Right.
take.
Didn't he start as just a photographer, and then he kind of like stepped into the directing shoes over time?
I think so, yeah. Because I've seen a lot of his photography books, and he was really solid. I think he grew up in New York, and I don't know what I was reading a biography on him that literally was like had listed every single time he took a dump. I feel like I got
Literally, Chad. Literally.
I
I don't think you know what that
maybe
word
not
means.
literally, but I was like 150 pages into this biography, and I swear I had gotten from like
He's in his teen years now.
yeah, he was like barely 12 years old and playing with a camera by the end of it. So it was I don't know that it really helped inform my opinion of who this man was, who was supposedly super super secretive and
The biography left him a cipher, just as before.
yes. And he's, notoriously known for a ton of takes, very meticulous. And he might have been the first filmmaker that I know of that is known for that.
Yeah, where
At
he
least.
really like kind of drove some people crazy with his
Yeah.
methods of directing.
And it's not
And
like
like
that.
the multiple takes thing, like Shelley Duvall in The Shining, it was like 140 takes in one scene where she was crying.
Yeah.
They were kind of going that way in Eyes Wide Shut. I seem to remember there was the scene that started with Nicole Kidman, who was supposed to look like she had been crying for hours. I don't think they shot a billion takes like they did on The Shining, but he did tell Nicole Kidman to go away for a few hours and just cry, so she would look like she had been crying for a few hours.
God.
So working for him must have been some form of torture, but everything usually turned out so well, people were lining up to do it eventually.
Yeah, I always wondered though how much of that is kind of made up. Like some of it's like, oh, did you hear
It's
like
the
Kubrick did
mythos
this,
of him.
this, and this, and like really.
Well, I don't know. The story from The Shining was that he shot over 100 takes from one angle,
Yeah.
like for one little part of that scene.
Well, didn't
It
he?
wasn't
They
over
also say
coverage.
like he hated Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, it was sort of mutual. I think.
Like, and I'm sure it was mutual, but I don't know. I like to think that directors aren't that sadistic, like to have put someone through that
Yeah,
on purpose. But you never know. I mean,
that would be nice to think.
they
that.
could. It could have been a situation where they just hated each other. I mean, that's certainly
They were holed up
possible.
in a hotel. They really went to Colorado for that, right?
I remember reading about it, and I think they shot some of it actually in Oregon at a hotel.
Oh, okay. Well, in any case,
And
they were like,
they did some also at Colorado at the Stanley Hotel, but they also most of it the interiors were shot on a stage.
oh, it's just
They
a stage.
built it, yeah.
I thought they had actually gone out for a few months to shoot the whole movie, not at the hotel from the exteriors, but a different hotel for the interiors. And they were just like, they were very remote. They had no access to agents and the studio people and yada yada. They were just out there sort of camping. I mean, it's a hotel still, but it wasn't fully staffed.
I don't know the
making a
exact
movie.
specifics of it
I
because I
I
didn't
watched the
research it,
docu-
but I know because I've been up there because I grew up in
Yeah.
Colorado, so we went up to the Stanley Hotel quite a bit, and my friend just recently got married there, so we go in. The bar was clearly not the same bar.
Yeah.
You walk around and there's the maze out front is not there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the maze was ever there. I feel like someone said that it was at the Colorado, like outside the Stanley Hotel, but I'm not sure that it was actually at any point.
Well, I know, like, Stephen King based the book on the real hotel, but as for the movie, like, maybe it used to have a garden, but they got rid of it because it was too expensive to maintain. Could have been something like that.
Well, I know that the remake of The Shining that was done in like the late 90s
For, like, the miniseries version?
miniseries version, I know that was actually shot at the Stanley Hotel
How nice for Stephen King.
Like
finally
Stephen
got
King
it his
wanted
way.
it. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So.
Well, long story short, there is a documentary on the DVD for The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick collection.
That's directed by his daughter.
I think so. Yeah, that's a really good documentary. It's like a fly on the wall kind of look at the making of the movie. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend it for any Kubrick fans. But if you're a Kubrick fan, you may have already watched it.
That's true.
But anyway, we're not watching The Shining tonight.
My whole point, though, was that people do tend to. I'm gonna create a word here.
Mythologize.
How'd you know what the word was that I was gonna create?
I don't know.
Because you knew.
I saw it forming on your lips.
Yes. People tend to make this whole character around someone like Kubrick, you know, regardless of whether or not it's true or not. And then the same holds true with all the people who say that he shot the moon landings. Like, you know, and his daughter.
Really happened, man.
His daughter, like, I read something somewhere where she was responding to, like, you know, these people that were saying adamant that Kubrick shot the thing, and she just was like laughing. She was like, "These people have no idea."
I would prefer it if she was like Buzz Aldrin and actually punched these motherfuckers out.
Right. There goes our moon landing people. Our whole fan base just went away. No, I totally agree. She should hit him with a in the face with a 2x4
or a C-stand.
Yeah, but I don't know that I can't imagine that he was that insane. You know, I imagine him being a perfectionist and being very fussy about being a perfectionist. And, like, when people complain, like, oh, do we have to do this again? Like, I could see him getting pissed off and being like, yeah, it's not the way I wanted it to be. We need to keep doing it until it gets that way and stop complaining.
But how does all that not add up to what you've heard about him?
I guess it just depends. I guess in that case, it would depend on the Shelley Duvall's or whoever would.
It's possible
if they butt heads back, then I suppose I could see like this vitriol growing where they're like actually like fighting each other.
Right. Well, it's sort of like online reviews. You only get the bad ones because people who are satisfied with the service or product don't go to the trouble of leaving a positive review most of the time.
Right.
You only hear about the bad shit.
Right.
So there is that.
I mean, I'm trying to think of another actor who. Well, I guess didn't Malcolm McDowell, like, he didn't speak with Kubrick for a long time.
I don't know anything about that one.
I remembered reading about that recently where Malcolm McDowell was saying, yeah, it wasn't until like really towards the end that they kind of kissed and made up about something. And I don't even know that it was about the movie, the filming of the movie. It might have been about something else entirely.
I seem to remember some story about Clockwork Orange when he's got those things in his eyes, keeping his eyelids open.
Yeah.
Like, those are real.
Oh, yeah.
The guy putting eye drops in his eyes in the movie, that was like an actual nurse or a doctor or something who really had to do that or else his eyeballs would dry out.
Yeah.
That was not acting. He was just like, God, make it stop. Let's get this over with.
Now that does seem like torture. Like,
right, that's physical
like
torture.
Someone bumps you and like literally gouges your eye out.
Right.
Like,
I think it was like he got scratches on his corneas or something
God, yeah.
from that shit. Because he was flinching too much. It just, it was so uncomfortable he couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Hope I'm not making that up. I hope I'm not grabbing that from some other
allegedly.
Story.
We have a lot of allegedlys on this show.
God, we're going to get sued for
We don't
libel.
actually know anything. All this is made up.
If anybody listened to this, we could get sued hardcore.
Yeah, what if Kubrick sues us?
Because he's not dead.
He's not dead.
He just hated Eyes Wide Shut so much he had to walk away.
Right. I love that movie.
It's a good movie. I like it a lot.
I don't even think it's on Blu-ray.
No?
I don't think so. Huh. Wait, no, it is. Yeah, definitely. It was in the collection.
Oh, okay.
But this one is Criterion disc. So.
This might... I'm not going to look it up on my phone right now, but this might be his like second or third feature film.
Well,
he had made The Killers or The Killing before this.
It wasn't. It wasn't The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, or was that somebody else?
Isn't that fucking the guy, the evil husband from Rosemary's Baby? Cassavetes. Isn't that Cassavetes?
Killing of a Chinese.
That's Cassavetes.
It's funny, like, Cassavetes is one of those guys that's somehow eluded me. Even though I feel like I appreciate what they did because I always heard that was like the
That was the
spawning.
start of the indie.
Yeah, it was
movement.
really the spawning of the indie movement of like, you know what, my wife and I or my girlfriend and I are just gonna go make a movie and
with our friends.
fuck y'all.
And,
I've got a camera and I've got the money to do it.
He made enough money as an actor, he could afford to get some black and white reversal stock and just go and shoot.
And then made awesome movies that all his actor friends loved to be in. And
yeah, I've only seen a couple. The one.
Faces. There's Faces.
Faces. I like Faces, and Woman on the Edge of a Nervous Breakdown.
Yeah,
Is that?
I think that's right.
What that's called?
I don't know. We can delve into him later because I know I want to watch that set of films like eventually. And I've seen like his son, Cassavetes has like a whole brood of directors that have come out of
Nick Cassavetes, right?
Yeah, Nick Cassavetes. I think his daughter too. I don't remember her first name, but she made a film recently. And like Nick Cassavetes' film was pretty good, if I remember correctly. It had Parker Posey in it, I think. I think I own it somewhere, but I don't know what it was called. But anyway, long story short, Paths of Glory.
Oh, a funny thing I need to mention before we roll this thing. I was in San Francisco several years ago, and there was some theater in the Castro district that was playing a Kirk Douglas double feature. The first one was Paths of Glory on the marquee, and Ace in the Hole, which is another great movie.
Billy Wilder?
Yeah, I believe so. That's a fucking great movie. Recommend it for anybody. But the way they were lined up, and this is in the Castro, it said Glory Hole on the right side of the marquee. And I thought that was pretty funny.
I mean, sometimes they do these things and you kind of go, yeah, that was probably on purpose. I mean, you don't know, though. Who knows?
We don't know.
We don't know, but it probably made for a magical image on, Facebook somewhere.
I think I got a picture of it, yeah.
Yeah. So, second or third movie, I feel like this was his third. Was this before or after... Yeah, we can talk about this later, but I feel like this was after Spartacus. Like, Spartacus was first.
Really? No, Spartacus was in the 60s.
Was it after?
I think so.
How old? Fucking Kirk Douglas.
It was color. I know they had color film in the pretty early days of film.
I'm just shocked that, like, the image of Kirk Douglas on Paths of Glory makes him already look like he's a 60-year-old man.
And he's like 100 now.
He's still fucking alive. Like, this guy just...
Oh, yeah, we just mentioned him in the last one.
Yeah, we did. We were talking about him just being alive, and yet we've lost the Bill Paxtons of the world.
Can't tell what he says anymore, but he's still alive.
I know that I'm going to a play in Culver City at the Kirk Douglas like, Playhouse or whatever the hell it's called soon. So he's still around and kicking, and I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see. I'm excited to see how much of Kubrick's, his... He always shot in this says it was 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio, which
is only a little bit wider than a standard 4:3.
Yeah, that's
television.
not even 16:9.
No,
but that's pretty common for him. Like he always shot like 4:3 images for the most part. Like he was never, I guess, close to 16:9. But he never really, I guess, with the exception of 2001.
Was that like a 70 millimeter?
Wasn't
2 point?
When I think of
3.5
2001, I think of just like super widescreen, like 240.
Well, I know that at least the effects were done in 70 millimeter, like they did a lot at the time. I don't think the whole movie was shot in 70 millimeter, but I know that there are 70 millimeter prints out there now,
right,
to like keep all the detail of those effect shots. Yeah.
Well, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. See you on the other side.
Hey, wait, is this movie in black and white?
I would, yes. Yes, it is.
Motherfucker!
And it's in mono, apparently.
Oh,
black
good.
and white and mono.
You only need one speaker. Cool. Just turn off the right one, I guess.
That's kind of strange, isn't it? No,
not at the time.
All right. Well, cool. Let's start it.
Let's go.
I'm not afraid of dying tomorrow, only of getting killed. It's as clear as mud. Well, which would you rather be done in by? A bayonet or a machine gun? Oh, a machine gun, naturally. Naturally, that's just my point. They're both pieces of steel ripping into your guts. Only proves that most of us are more afraid of getting hurt than of getting killed. Look at Bernard. He panics when it comes to gas. But gas doesn't bother me a bit. He's seen photos of gas cases. Doesn't mean anything to me. But I'll tell you something, though. I hate like the devil to be without my tin hat. But on the other hand, I don't mind not having a tin hat for my tail. Why is that?
You ought to,
Because I know a wound in the head will hurt much more than one in the tail. The tail is just meat, but the head is all bone.
Now speak for yourself.
Tell me this. Aside from the bayonet, what are you most afraid of?
Explosives.
Exactly, and it's the same with me, because I know that it can chew you up worse than anything else. Look, it's just like I'm trying to tell you. If you're really afraid of dying, you'd be living in a funk all the rest of your life because you know you've got to go someday, any day. And besides, if it's death that you're really afraid of, why should you care about what it is that kills you?
No, you're too smart for me, Professor. All I know is nobody wants to die.
So I feel you were just about to tell me something about Kubrick's first.
Yeah, I'm reading this on my phone while you were getting a drink. An early critical test of Kubrick's obsession with control on the set came during the making of Paths of Glory, as recalled by Kirk Douglas. Quote, "He made the veteran actor Adolphe Menjou do the same scene 17 times. That was my best reading," Menjou announced. "I think we can break for lunch now." It was well past the usual lunchtime, but Kubrick said he wanted another take. Menjou went into an absolute fury. In front of Douglas and the entire crew, he blasted off on what he claimed was Kubrick's dubious parentage and made several other unprintable references to Kubrick's relative greenness in the art of directing actors. So even this was his fourth feature film. His previous movie, The Killing, had been a flop, apparently, even though it did critically well. And he walks into this United Artists picture, and he's demanding an 18th take from a veteran actor. Mm-hmm. And United Artists was a studio made by actors. Like 4 actors, basically. And it was sort of like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
He made a fucking bomb a couple years ago.
This mousy little dude.
Yeah.
With his weird haircut.
Yeah, but apparently, because Spartacus was Kubrick's next movie 3 years later in 1960, apparently Kirk Douglas, who was a producer on Spartacus, liked him enough that when they needed a replacement director, he said, go get Kubrick. They made Paths of Glory together, and it turned out well.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking you, like, what year. You said this was 57.
Yeah.
Spartacus was 60.
Yeah.
And Lawrence of Arabia was 62.
I believe that sounds right.
There's like, I see, you know, it's been a while since we've watched films in this era, you and I haven't watched that many. I just recently saw Lawrence of Arabia, which has, well, I guess every single like Hollywood epic like always had like the big grandiose ballroom shots, you know. Mm-hmm. We've got a fairly wide lens and you're covering a lot of space with just a small amount of people usually, you know. And this, I don't know how early, like, I wish I knew more about like the history of photographing these kind of rooms, but obviously sound came a long way because there's a lot of walking and talking in this where they just let the actors wander anywhere, and the sound is picking them up generally well. Mm-hmm. Not perfect by any means.
Right. Like in the courtroom scene, we had Kirk Douglas kind of shouting over the whole room.
Yeah.
You could hear the echoing in his voice.
But you couldn't necessarily see some of that dialogue where he's offering the defense. Mm-hmm. Like some of it's kind of difficult to hear, you know, at times. Like you have to kind of like strain to hear over the echo and everything else.
I think they were trying to give it a sense of realness. Like that's really what the room would be like, where it really happened.
And that was the most striking thing about this movie, I felt like, is the
realness.
Well, just like the moments that you, like when I saw a lens flare, mm-hmm. and I was commenting on, oh, there's a lens flare, because they were looked down upon.
It was seen as like a flaw. Yeah. Like, oh, God, we can't have that.
And that was...
And then a little bit later, there was a meeting Douglas was having with somebody else in his office in the trenches, and they're mm-hmm. standing directly underneath or in front, just behind this light like right in the trench, and it's just blasting with this like flat white light. And I'm kind of going, in 57, they did not light movies this way. They wanted everybody to look pretty.
Right.
Basically, I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule before and after this movie.
It really does prove the age-old rule of, if you want to be recognized, you got to break the rules that are there. Which, that was the number one thing I was noticing. Like, for this, like, it felt like you could see just outright he's breaking a lot of rules that had probably been set up, and by this point, like, you're saying, like, you had a problem with the actor, you know, who probably had never in his life dealt with somebody.
Yeah, I am an actor, sir.
Yeah.
I will do as many takes as I wish.
Not to say that there aren't directors that had been absolute pains in the ass. Like, I know Fritz Lang was a notorious asshole. Allegedly. But
I don't think the estate of Fritz Lang is going to come after us this
probably
time.
Probably not, no. Yeah. But, you could clearly see, like, he's got a very distinct visual eye, and that comes from his background in photography, where he knows how to frame a shot and does it extremely well. He didn't know how to... He was still a little weird on blocking.
Yeah, there were a couple parts where...
wonky blocking in the
people just
beginning.
like walk in circles inexplicably, or they take the long way through a room, walking behind as many objects as they can, instead of staying in camera. And there was no reason for it. I could not see any artistic purpose for that. I'm thinking it's just a gut feeling that there was equipment in the way, and the actor couldn't have walked where he would have stayed on camera. I think he had to walk around this big potted plant because there's no other path. It's either that or behind the camera, way off screen.
Let's talk about the story a little bit, because it was actually... I expected this to be a war movie, like, all the way through.
Me too, when I first saw it, yeah.
And it is more of a... I mean, obviously, Paths of Glory, like, now the title makes much more sense, because it's like saying there are multiple paths to glory, but there's really only one glory.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation of the title. I should point out one other thing I saw on Wikipedia. Apparently they didn't have a title for the book this movie came from. People had a contest or whatever, and somebody suggested a line from a poem, which was an anti-war poem, and the line at the end says something like, "The paths of glory lead but to the grave." Meaning, the paths of glory are what the soldiers are on.
Right.
They only lead to death.
Right.
So the whole thing was conceived really from the start as an anti-war message kind of a thing.
I was going to say, this seemed like it had pretty liberal overtones.
Yeah. This is like over 10 years after World War II.
Right. It's a World War I film.
Yeah, it's like over 40 years after World War I. And I get, was like Korea happening in 57, 56?
If not, it was going to happen very soon. Yeah,
I think it was in there somewhere. It has been hypothesized by others, but I also think it's true that there's no such thing as a pro-war movie.
Right.
Even the most like Michael Bay pro-war thing you can maybe think of is really anti-war, because it shows that it shows the hell of war.
Right.
People dying needlessly for just for following orders, and just to achieve some goal that some dude in an office 1,000 miles away is asking for.
Is saying, yeah. And I mean, this is almost it takes all these things, and I'm actually surprised that Kirk Douglas's character wasn't like tried for, not treason, but he's constantly
he's always questioning the orders and saying like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Because this doesn't sound great."
Right, to the point of just like mocking them, almost of just being like,
he's so
sarcastic. The whole movie is like kind of sarcastic about the way it presents. Like, oh, we're gonna set up this guy who had his skull fractured, and he's one of the 3 people who's got to be executed, but we got to execute him anyway. Let's prop him up. We got to wake him up so that he can open his eyes while he's being shot.
Wake him up just so he can be executed.
It's kind of a comedy in that sense. Like,
it's super dark if it's funny at all. But there is this like absurdist streak through the whole thing. During the trial, these three soldiers are the movie would argue unfairly put on trial for cowardice during battle. There's a whole plot here. Just watch the movie, you'll get it. But they weren't actually being cowards. One guy was like overrun and he couldn't like make it out of the trenches at all. One guy fell down. He was unconscious the whole time. And another guy was just picked from his battalion with like a straw drawing or a piece of paper or something. They had to pick one person from each battalion to put up to be executed, and this guy just got unlucky. So it's pretty unfair that these people are in this situation, and it is loosely based on a true story. These aren't the real names or anything.
I was gonna ask if that was.
There was a real incident in World War One.
The French, because
it was the French.
That was something I also found weird, that this is about the French army, which it seems like all the movies I remember, war movies of the era.
It was always like, about the Americans.
The Americans, yeah. Sometimes the Brits, you know.
Right, yeah. But all the other countries are always sort of the supporting.
Mm-hmm.
They were just the auxiliary characters.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it the same? Do you know much about it? Like,
no.
Okay.
The real incident, no. It was just mentioned that it happened. And I think it was sort of an incident that people knew about, but pretty much every army at that time except America and maybe Canada
had moved past that sort of.
No, like everybody else did the same thing.
Wow.
They would use like apparently random executions to quote boost morale to make sure everybody was actually fighting so they would not also be executed.
Right.
It's like either the Jerrys are gonna kill you or the Frenchies will kill you. And they have like this evil general character in this movie say exactly that. If they don't want to fight, they won't die by German bullets, they'll die by French ones.
Yeah, right.
And that gets back to this absurd thing that they keep highlighting. Like these guys, they only care about winning the war. They don't see how ridiculous it is to kill your own soldiers and therefore hurt your own chances of winning any battles in the future.
Right.
Like the same character was ordering people to shell their own trenches to force the soldiers out.
Right.
Because they were just like, pinned down by gunfire.
Well, and absurd is such a great word for this movie because that's like, it's not shown in an absurd way even remotely, although it looks like Kirk Douglas is about to have a mental meltdown many times in the movies where he's just so dumbfounded by how like stupid this whole process is.
Right.
That he's just like, what? We're gonna execute these three basically innocent dudes who were sent to an impossible task and couldn't follow through, so they were executed for it.
Yeah, and another argument from these generals is like, well, if it was really an impossible task, they should have still tried, and then we would know it was impossible because everybody would be dead now. But because they're not dead, we'll never know if it was impossible.
Yep. And of course, like you said at the beginning of the movie, like we learn really this whole thing is to get the main general,
the
promotion
there's like his rank. There are kind of two generals. One of them is an older guy with he's a little shorter and fatter, I guess, portly. I guess he's not like obese or anything, but
he's like
that guy comes general. In. He's like the ranking general. He comes in and orders this other, what I've been referring to as the evil general because I don't remember his name now. He says, well, we've got to take this one location they call the anthill. We got to have it in 2 days. And the evil general, to his credit, says, well, that's crazy. We can't do it. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough artillery. We can't do it. But then the other guy says, well, this is totally unrelated, of course, but you're being considered for a promotion. The implication being like, if you can pull this off, you'll get this promotion. So he immediately changes his tune and he says, okay, we're going to lose 60% of our guys, but I'll do it.
Right.
Just so he can get a promotion. And I'm afraid, like even today, that's a lot of shit going on. I think people just try to look out for themselves. They, career military people, they just want to get the the next star stripe or whatever they do.
Well, and war has always been a numbers game, and this they straight up lay it out.
Cannon fodder.
They say, okay, this many percent will die when we reach this far, and then this percent's gonna reach this position, and more and more like.
They
and
calculate they're
you
going to lose
should have
60% of the whole.
Yeah, you
group.
should have 40% left by the end of this.
And then you just got to hold the location
then you gotta
until
hold it
more
all
support
day.
comes. Well, why don't we wait for support?
So it's almost like just blatantly taking the absurdity of that and just laying it out for the audience, and then following it up with other things that are absurd, like the three being executed and why, and like how they're chosen.
And of course, the worst one is the guy who isn't even awake for his own execution.
His own execution, yeah.
It's a very frustrating movie in that way, because you're in Kirk Douglas's shoes. You're looking at everybody going like, "Is this really happening?"
Yeah, and
it really did.
There's a few scenes in this movie that were just kind of generic, whatever, and that was, I would say, the opening scene where it's the two generals talking about the promotion.
That's like the setup for everything.
Setting it up. That the blocking in that was horrible.
Yeah,
for one.
I wonder if they shot this movie in sequence, and that was like the first thing.
There was the actor who threw a fit. Was he one of those? Was he the bad general?
I can look.
If I had to guess, I'm gonna guess right now that it was the bad guy, the main bad guy.
Right. Let me look up the cast, and you keep talking. Fill time. Go.
So outside of that, which was kind of like old Hollywood style directing, like
yes,
set up the camera, move it around, put it on dolly. It's constantly.
It was very wide shot, medium shot, close up.
Yeah,
it was.
It was all one tracking shot, if I believe, but it wasn't.
Oh yeah, part of that scene was one. Yeah,
but then when we really start to see Kubrick and like seeing how he moves the camera was when we're down in the trenches, and the trenches, were
Adolf, the guy who threw a fit, played the evil general.
Of course.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell this guy's smarmy attitude. So I'm guessing it was that scene, the one with the terrible blocking, where he threw that shit fit.
It could be.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Because it looked like a problematic kind of scene. Because the rest of the scenes were very easily blocked with him.
Mm-hmm.
But when the movie really like stood out to me as something that was kind of like unique was when we get into the trenches and you've got the two soldiers who are kind of getting ready for bed, and they're talking about the ways to die.
Oh yeah.
Are you afraid to die, or are you afraid of
the pain?
The pain of dying, and they're discussing being shot like in the head versus in the gut.
Would you rather have a bayonet or a machine gun? Oh, machine gun. Of course, a machine gun, because it's faster, right?
Yeah. But
it's still metal.
You want to be shot in like the leg, because that's like that's like distant, but you're fleshy. But if you get shot in the head, it's like a skull, and you're breaking shit. And and they're talking about some really dark shit that I don't remember really hearing too much in.
No, for
this era.
Yeah, for this era, like they were getting pretty.
Especially people who had come back from World War II are listening to this, because they're like nodding probably the whole time, like, "Yep."
I wonder if it was sort of meant for those people. This is over 10 years later, so that's kind of a stretch, I guess. But I wonder if it is people, World War II, and then Korea, which is ramping up. Like, war was only becoming more public and more in the papers and more on television.
Just about every single male on the planet had been through war at that point.
Yeah,
I would imagine. So most of them sitting,
unless they were still a draft,
unless they were like teenagers or But when was best years of their lives?
I can look it up,
because that was also known as kind of like one of those movies that really like opened the eyes.
That was sort of hokey though, and like
it was more
Capra-esque sort of a way.
But they
I made it home and I'm missing my legs, but everything's okay.
But there was some dark shit in that movie. It was the first like movie about like PTSD, really.
Yeah.
They just didn't have a label for it at the time. Or at least not in the movie.
That was 1946. That was 11 years before this.
Yeah. So that, like, they had started to touch on it, but really that
really was meant for veterans.
Right. Yeah. And this feels like, this feels more like a response to, like, the absurdity of war and the absurdity of certain things, and it shows, Kirk Douglas is still living up kind of like an iconic role in the sense like he's still like the kind of man that people dream to be if they're going to join the military. Like, I'm going to join the military. I'm going to be this kind of
He's got a cleft chin.
honorable guy who's going to always fight for the good thing.
Right.
So in that sense,
but in this case, like, the whole system is against you if you're Kirk Douglas here.
Right. But I mean, I'm saying in that sense, the movie is a little idyllic.
Yeah.
In
it definitely has. He's the hero.
He's the hero, and that's still, nowadays that hero may be a little flawed or more realistic, where they have their own doubts or whatever as well. Because he doesn't really have any doubts through the movie, even when he's charging into bullets blindly.
Right. He's a soldier himself, and he goes for it, and he tries to follow his orders, but he knows, it's a morality tale. He knows that what he's being told is not right. Even
after he's, I guess he's not technically promoted, but he's offered the position of general after the other general is
sort of
on his way to being court-martialed for having ordered the shelling of his own soldiers.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't happen. It's interesting. I wonder what the response of this movie, the response to this movie was from the general public. Like, whether or not it was like, did people look at it as if it was liberal propaganda?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see if they mention that.
Or is it really something that,
Controversy. On its release, the film's anti-military tone was subject to criticism and censorship.
Yeah, I can see that.
In France, French military vehemently criticized the film.
Well, they're speaking English.
Yeah, not historically accurate whatsoever. In Germany, the film was withdrawn from the Berlin Film Festival to avoid straining relations with France. Guess things are still on the mend there.
I guess that makes sense.
But it was nominated for Best Film, lost to Bridge on the River Kwai at the BAFTAs.
Yeah,
doesn't mention Academy Awards here. But it seemed like critically it did well. I don't know if it was a huge financial success.
Nowadays nobody'd really care. Like, there'd be some criticism or some controversy. There's always something about
some blowhard going like, these people are un-American.
Yeah, but for the time, I mean, especially in the 50s, like, I'm sure it was.
It seems edgy.
It does. I wonder, like, were veterans really going to see movies like this? I mean, I guess like
they didn't want to relive that shit.
I was watching when they're storming through the bunkers and through the basically
no man's land?
The wasteland. Yeah. Like, it's pretty like realistic. Like,
it seems like it. They show one guy just explode, like a direct hit from a mortar shell, just
like, and like that had to be pretty rare.
Yeah.
To see that level of intensity, like, in a battle scene, like, watching that, I was like, man, like,
did they still
if you had gone, like, a World War II vet watching the Normandy beach in Saving Private Ryan, like, you had to just be sitting there going like, oh fuck.
I think they had veterans on the news all the time, like these poor guys just crying when they watch the opening to Saving Private Ryan, going like that. They got it right. It was exactly like that. Everybody died,
and I don't know why I just watched it again. And I'm sure it was similar to this because for the time, like, that whole no man's land battle charge is like pretty intense, and well done.
I am guessing I haven't seen a lot of movies about World War One. In fact, this might be the only one. But I'm guessing that most of the other movies, they kind of like gloss over the gritty details of it. And it's more like Hollywood movies would be about, one man who goes out alone and he braves no man's land and he makes it over and kills
Right, of course.
the fucking...
Which is basically Hacksaw Ridge.
Except he doesn't kill anybody.
No, but he survives everything.
Yeah.
It seems like. Spoiler.
True story.
But that's kind of the same thing where there's, you know, they get up to the top of Hacksaw Ridge and there's more or less a no man's land,
And
wasteland
he's got to bring everybody down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But this might have been like the first time it was given a more realistic treatment on screen where people could see the fucking horror of that. People getting mowed down. I don't even think they amped it up all that much because it could have been a lot worse.
yeah.
I was just gonna ask, did they still have that the censorship code in place in '57? Wasn't that like the height of like communism and or the communism paranoia?
I don't think it really came like sort of peel away until the 60s.
Okay, so I'm sure they could have made it a lot worse, but they didn't want to get the movie banned outright.
Right.
Because they really could have had 90% of the extras in that scene just like and fall over.
Right.
Maybe like...
Well, and most of them do. They
Eventually.
did blow up. They do blow up like the one, like...
Dummy.
It was clearly a dummy and it just explodes.
Yeah.
But that was like, wow, yeah, they just did that. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'll maybe... When I watch like older films, like I'm always shocked when something like slightly risque happens.
Yeah.
When, you know, maybe there's actually 20 years of films that have been doing the same thing. And I think that's the problem with coming at movies without no sense of like a timeline of how things happen, you know, and the film history of it. Or, you know,
Yeah, we try to keep the context in mind.
this is our first movie that was before. I think our very first movie that failed, Pigs, was like in the 70s, but we didn't actually finish that one. I don't think we've done anything pre-1980.
Wow.
Until this. So, you know, and that's because we've grown up, we understand the language of cinema in the time that we've been alive.
Yeah.
Where it's progressed, and it's progressed a lot.
Yeah, it's exponential.
Even since 2000, I'm always mind blown. Like watching Frailty last week, I'm like, you see and listening to the trailer for that particular movie, like you feel the difference in time. And like to think that for
some reason the movie I always think back on to like 1999 or whatever. Can you imagine watching the movie Bulletproof Monk now? That would be I mean, it seemed like silly at the time, but now
it's like extremely silly.
Yeah, it's just a joke.
Yeah.
It does this like fucking bullet time shit, and it just doesn't...
Well, any of it. Yeah, and I was obsessed with Chow Yun Fat at the time, too.
A lot of people were. That's why they made that movie.
Yeah, right.
But it's like, film is moving so fast. It's only been 15 years since they made that, and it's just like, Jesus.
It feels night and day.
Yeah.
Everything has its era, and everything feels very specific of that era. And I know we've talked about that a little bit on other films, but it's interesting to me, like, because I guess I don't know. Anything from really the late 20s, there's some films in the late 20s, through to like the early 60s. You could really almost blend many of those
like some
films together because a lot of them do fall under the same sort of style.
Yeah.
And you don't
like
see...
the basics of cinema had been invented and they just stuck to that.
There is a progression going on, but it's hidden.
Yeah, and it's more technological, I think. Like the invention of better film stocks, the invention of better cameras and filming equipment like dolly tracks and things like that. Yeah. Like in the silent movies.
Audio especially.
Audio, definitely, of course. And in some old silent movies, Buster Keaton, like they would just use a train as their dolly track.
Right.
They didn't have customizable miniature track that they could put the camera on necessarily, or, you know, it would just be on like a little wheeled wagon.
Mm-hmm. But then you think about basically everything from the point of the space race onward. It's amazing how we go from this, or even Lawrence of Arabia, and there's nothing technically marvelous about either of those movies. And I know that's kind of blasphemous to say about Lawrence of Arabia because it is huge and expansive.
Mm-hmm. That is when I think the whole movie was shot on 70 millimeter.
I can believe that, and that would be insane considering where they shot it and how much sand was all over the place. But it that really involves just like hauling a ton of shit out in the middle of the desert and being able to survive without killing anyone in the process of making a movie like that. But there wasn't anything. You don't feel the difference in storytelling in that movie.
No.
That storytelling style is very similar to, say, this movie or, most of classical Hollywood. Of course, there's differences, but, it's not like you're watching Fight Club or something where it's completely night and day different.
And if you were used to this, I mean, if the style of Fight Club just dropped in their laps overnight, I mean, nobody would even want to make that movie. It would be bonkers.
Right. Although
it's got to be
my number one dream
evolution
of all time is, if I ever get a time machine, is to bring a print of Jurassic Park.
What the fuck?
Back and show people, because you just
show it to the Lumiere brothers.
If you want to be executed, just do that. Yeah, bring it back to Lumiere brothers. Show it to like a crowded vaudeville theater and just watch the world burn. Like
the devil is real and he is here.
Yeah, I still think that damn dinosaur is real and they just filmed it.
Yeah, the CG wasn't that advanced in 1993. I think they just grew dinosaur to make it easier on themselves.
Yeah. But anyway, back to this. Like, it's interesting to see because there's clearly very Kubrick shots.
There are several shots where the camera's tracking forwards and backwards through the trenches, and you see those kind of tracking shots all the time in Kubrick's movies. The Shining, kind of famous for following Danny down the hallway on his little bicycle. Even in Full Metal Jacket, as the camera is following Arlie Ermey doing his drill sergeant thing up and down the line of soldiers.
Yeah.
That was one of his...
There's also more traditional framing, too, of like the big open marble rooms.
Yeah.
Where it's just like you get... Somehow he takes these, like, very... Like what I was saying, 4x3, in this case 1.66 or whatever the aspect ratio is.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow his frames feel different than, say, someone else shooting with the same sort of setup.
Do you think that comes from
it's almost
still
like
photography?
Yeah, it's almost like
that ratio.
It's almost like a medium format kind of way of shooting things, whereas other setups are more based on like what's in the frame, like as far as actors are concerned, like how they're in relation to each other, whereas Kubrick stuff almost is in relation to how the background lines up and how everyone falls into that, which is kind of how his stuff kind of feels to me. I don't know, but you definitely see the style, not all of it. This is definitely the beginning of his style.
Right.
I do want to know how in the hell he got started in the industry, because he's just a kid from Brooklyn, I think.
You got to finish that biography.
Yeah, but it's somewhere in either Queens or Brooklyn. And for him to go from that upbringing into Hollywood, I have no idea how he made that jump, because that's...
I know I've heard the story, but I can't recall it now.
Like how he got...
Yeah, how he even got interested. I think it did come from...
Like, who gave him movies to direct, like...
Yeah. He had made short films before he did features, so it could be as simple as he did photography, and then he was like, well, the natural next step is to do moving pictures. So he made some shorts. Who knows how? Because shorts weren't really a big deal back then.
Right.
And
well, that's what I was. When you said he did shorts, I was like, really? That was a thing people did? I mean, this was like pre-film school era.
Yeah. But
Like,
his first 3 features were all like B movies. They were like crime movies of various sorts, little thrillers. So I think, like a lot of people, he just sort of fell ass backwards into making movies, and eventually found his own voice,
right.
which we're finally seeing
Or he
here.
grew the confidence to be able to carry his voice through
Yeah,
to fruition.
like his previous movie, The Killing, was about like the killing is not a murder; it's a heist movie essentially. It's set at a horse racetrack, and you do see a lot of like the more beginnings of Kubrick there, in the slow pace of it and the deliberate like building up of suspense in different ways. I think it isn't as visually arresting as this movie is, but you can definitely see it in
Was
The
Killing his first or right
That was
before
his
this?
third.
Third. So it was right before.
Right before this, a couple years before this, and I don't think I've even heard of his first 2 movies.
Was Spartacus his first venture into color? Which, you can really
Yeah,
only
I
say
believe it was.
God only knows how much he actually did do of Spartacus.
Right. I think it was most of it, like over 80% of
Not
Spartacus.
really. So that was like early on.
Yeah.
Kirk's like, we got to get rid of this guy, and my little weird friend can direct this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Spartacus was his first like big movie. This one is fairly big, I think, but that was like
yeah.
that was a studio epic. Spartacus was a huge movie.
Right.
Tons of extras and,
But this, I mean, for the time, this is when we're talking about like studios at the golden age having made more films than ever before. At the period, they were making so many movies. Even in comparison to now, like pales in comparison to how much they were making back then, which is
Well, it was a lot
frightening. Well, it was cheaper, and plus, I guess everybody was in the studio,
yeah.
basically living on near the lot,
Yeah.
and like contracted. And,
As far as what it took to create material and content, audiences were far less sophisticated then than they are today.
Right.
So they would accept fucking anything.
Although this is
Like
57,
another wrestling picture.
This is 57, though. I wouldn't say that they hadn't people.
They
had
were
grown
definitely
up,
standout movies. Critics
people
were in
were
place,
our
everything.
age watching this and having had movies their entire lives.
Yeah.
And like that. So they had definitely had a refined taste, I'm sure, in some sense.
I bet some people had the same
Mostly
conversation about how
not.
fast the art
Yeah.
form was changing.
But even today though, there's still 95% of people could care less about art in films.
Right. I remember, I think it was an Oscars that Chris Rock was hosting. And he went out to movie theaters and interviewed people like, oh, have you heard of all these Oscar-nominated films? No, never seen that. Oh, what are you here at the movie theater to see tonight? Aliens versus Predator.
Yeah, right.
That's what people still watch. I mean,
Oh, God. Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we all kind of come from that, I think, growing up. You have to kind of like...
there are many people who would hate the movies that I love. Yes.
Yeah.
It's all subjective.
There was definitely a period in my life where I went to one film school, technical film school. The second film school was an art film school. And the art film school basically said all those movies you love that Hollywood made, like Star Wars and whatever, they're all garbage.
It's Hollywood claptrap.
Yeah.
Just designed to sell you popcorn and candy bars.
And, and then they made us watch a 4-hour silent film, which I just wanted to, like,
Greed?
gouge
Was
my...
it Greed?
Yes, it was Greed.
Yeah.
Shot in the Mojave, right? Black and white.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that was so hard to get through. But, eventually you watch enough of those, your brain, I'm convinced, is totally rewired.
Well, you start to look at and for different things.
Well, yeah, because you have to, because you're like, I have to find something interesting in this, or I'm going to go insane. And I think ultimately it does adapt you in a way. It's like now I could feel like I can watch just about anything and find enjoyment in it, whereas like my friend, Matt, this was ages ago, Matthew not the Matt that we know here.
Uh-huh.
Different Matt. He and I went and saw Magnolia in the theater, and even for me, that was kind of a hard watch.
Oh, I
Matt
loved
got up like halfway through and like was, "Peace, I'm out." He couldn't do it.
I wonder what
And he was
the one
angry.
thing. I
He
wonder.
was angry in his chair.
I'm
he was
sure-
like just grumbling.
Well, when you pay for like a movie you're not enjoying, that feels like you fucked up. There's nothing you can do to fix that to get your time back. Even if you got your money back, you just wasted an hour.
Right. And that movie was extremely indulgent.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
And all the better for it.
I guess. You said you did like it?
Oh yeah, I love that movie still.
Okay. I haven't seen it since the day I saw it in the theater, so.
Oh.
It's definitely one of those ones I barely remember anything about. I love There Will Be Blood.
Mm-hmm.
That might be one of my top 5 of the last since 2000.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'll give it another shot, but we'll see. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this movie besides I'd love to watch Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon. I would love to sit and watch Barry Lyndon because that was probably in the 60s.
Barry Lyndon?
Yeah.
I think that was the 70s.
Yeah.
Like
It's
74,
definitely further along.
maybe? I'm just guessing.
And just see the difference,
Yeah.
What did he make in between this and Barry Lyndon?
Spartacus,
Okay.
Dr. Strangelove,
Okay.
Clockwork Orange. I think that was it.
That was it.
He doesn't have many movies, but
And I haven't seen Spartacus. I haven't seen I've seen Doctor Strangelove.
I would honestly
I have
say
not
you can-
seen Clockwork Orange,
you could probably skip Spartacus. It is a perfectly fine movie.
but I'm guessing it's not
There's just no there.
him.
Yeah, it is not really Kubrick. Maybe except for a few parts.
Was his career like dead before Kirk brought him back for Spartacus? 'Cause
That
it
I
had
don't
been-
know. Well, here, I'm looking at this thing right now. His first feature, Fear and Desire, 1953.
Okay.
Second movie, Killer's Kiss, 1955, 2-year gap. The next movie, 1956, The Killing, which was a bomb. And then 1957, so we got a few in consecutive years, Paths of Glory, and then 3 years until Spartacus. So it is possible that he was having a hard time getting the next job, and then Kirk said,
Yeah. What
We're
about
not
my
wasting-
buddy? I like that movie we did. That
Yeah.
picture. I love that picture we did.
There, Spartacus 1960, Lolita 62,
Oh, Lolita.
Dr. Strangelove 64,
Wow, Lolita was 62.
2001 68, Clockwork Orange 71, Barry Lyndon 75.
Wow.
But I did want to mention, because we were talking about the absurdity of war for this movie. It seems like every war movie Kubrick made, and he made a few, Full Metal Jacket,
Yeah.
Barry Lyndon has war in it, but it's not a war movie. And Dr. Strangelove is about war,
Right.
but it's a different kind
It's
of war.
also kind of the absurdity of war.
Exactly. I think all Full Metal Jacket, Dr. Strangelove, and Paths of Glory all have this absurdist view of war. They handle it with different levels of seriousness, but it is still absurd. I think the first half of Full Metal Jacket in boot camp with R. Lee Ermey screaming his head off at his recruits and all that, that is absurd.
Oh, yeah.
That people put themselves through that, or they were drafted or whatever.
Right.
That shit happened. It is crazy. You will be killers when we are done with you. That sort of
Right.
horseshit.
Which they no longer do in the military, of course, but
Yeah.
they scaled that back considerably.
I know my dad told me stories when he was in boot camp. They had people exactly like that who were super nice guys outside of that scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Like they would be total hard asses for
For
16 hours a day, but the other 8 hours a day,
super nice.
teddy bears.
Right.
So it's just their job, but it put this, by putting it in the movie, it kind of made it all seem very strange and absurd
Yeah.
and surreal. And I guess we know what Kubrick thinks of war generally from these movies.
Generally looks down upon it. And it's kind of like, would you consider it like a smarmy position?
Smarmy.
Where it's like, it really is kind of like,
Sniveling.
No, I don't want to. I don't
Sniveling?
want to say like sniveling, but it is kind of looking down upon war.
Coming from a place of privilege. I don't know if he ever had to fight in a war.
No, I don't think he did.
If he was about, like, if he was born in 1930...
Not to defend war or anything. I'm just saying.
Give war a chance.
It's not condescending, but it's a little...
Arrogant?
Maybe, I don't know.
But I guess that's all I gotta say. I think it really is the first obvious piece of Kubrick's whole
Well, and then
whole
we say
career.
that without having seen the other three.
Yeah. I have
But-
seen The Killing, and it's good. It's worth watching.
Okay.
But I don't think it's like his official beginning.
At some
as an
point, I'll
artiste.
check out the other ones. But when I still haven't even seen Clockwork Orange,
Oh, shit.
or
But you knew what I was
we'll
talking
get it.
about,
I haven't
the eye
seen
things,
Lolita
right?
either. Yeah,
I've read Lolita, and I didn't get it, so I'm not in a
I
hurry
saw
to see the movie.
I saw the one with Jeremy Irons,
Oh, God.
the remake or whatever.
I heard that was very, very, very different.
I mean, I have no frame of reference, but Nabokov, who was the writer? Nabokov.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think we can call it a night on this one.
All right. Go watch Paths of Glory, gang.